do you and me have to be worlds apart?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Worlds Apart. I'm your host, Brian Wade. Worlds Apart is a program that looks to investigate how racism manifests itself within our society. Worlds Apart will consider the historic, scientific, cultural, and social factors that perpetuate racism. Again, welcome to part 2 in our series where we're discussing Dr. Jefferson Fish's latest book, Race and Intelligence, Separating Science from Myth. And again, I'd like to welcome Dr. Fish back to our program.
Good to be here.
Yes, Dr. Fish, briefly, give us some background about yourself and what you do.
Well, I'm a professor of psychology at St. John's University, and my specialties are clinical psychology and cross-cultural psychology. And it's in the cross-cultural psych part where I've gotten involved with the issues of race and intelligence.
Okay, very good. For our viewing audience, part 1, we're basically looking at various aspects of Dr. Fish's book where we discussed how he got interested in the issue of race and intelligence. We looked at what is race biologically versus social. We delved into the issue of intelligence, which is quite controversial and in a lot of ways misunderstood, you know, in terms of layman's perceptions of what it is and what actually doesn't measure and how do you define it, and are certain ethnic groups more intelligent versus other ethnic groups. And what I'd like to do, Shaylin, if you would, could you bring up statement 2 on your list, and I'd like to have Dr. Fish talk about that regarding the concept, there you go, about biological races, Dr. Fish.
Yes. Well, back in the 17th and 18th centuries, science was beginning to classify living things, and Linnaeus came up with a classification of different organisms, the plant world and animal world, and so on. And as part of that, he then unfortunately got into this area of classifying human beings and invented this concept of race, and included in it things like the clothes people wore and the customs that different groups had. And this persisted for a long time. The things that we would call cultural and social were intimately bound up with the notion of biological variability. And this continues to this day when people assume there might be differences between groups called races in intelligence. This is social behavior.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's while we're on a roll, Shaylin, can you bring up the next statement, because a lot of the issue around race and intelligence sort of fueled the eugenics movement, and could you give us some background about maybe what eugenics is and how did that fuel, you know, eliminating groups of people, if you would?
Okay. Well, early in the 20th century, there was this movement, which was, it's sometimes called scientific racism. Maybe I'd like to put the scientific in quotes or call it pseudo-scientific racism. But this is definitely what the leading scientists at the time believed. Basically, their argument was that the smart people were not having very many children, and the dumb people were having a lot of children. And furthermore, this included both other races, in quotes, meaning African Americans, and also immigrants from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe.
So it was race and class then, I guess, in terms of...
well, it was race and class and ethnicity.
Okay.
And so that they used these new IQ tests. Let me give the example of the immigrants from Europe. Of course, they didn't speak much English. Many of them had very little education, and as a result, they scored poorly on these IQ tests. And then these results were used to say they shouldn't be allowed to enter, and laws were passed that blocked immigration. And as a result, for example, one of the consequences of those laws was that when the Nazis started exterminating the Jews and Gypsies and other undesirables from their point of view,